The scream that tore through the night air sent Marcus Cole running toward the stables, before his conscious mind even registered what he had heard. He had been sitting on the porch of the boarding house in San Angelo, Texas, nursing a cup of bitter coffee and watching the stars pierce through the velvet darkness of the June sky in 1878. The sound was raw, primal, the kind of agony that bypassed all social pretense and cut straight to the bone. His boots hit the dusty ground hard as he sprinted across the yard, his heart hammering against his ribs with a force that had nothing to do with the physical exertion. When he threw open the stable door, the smell of hay and horse sweat washed over him, familiar and comforting despite the circumstances. The lantern hanging from a nail cast long shadows across the wooden beams, and there in the corner, collapsed against a stall door, was a woman he had never seen before. Her dark hair had come loose from its pins and hung in wild tangles around her face. Her dress, once fine but now torn and dusty, was bunched around her knees. But it was her face that stopped him cold. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and her whole body shook with sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deep and endless inside her. He approached slowly, the way he would a frightened horse. "Madam?" His voice came out softer than he intended. "Are you hurt?" She looked up at him then, and he saw her eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray and turbulent and full of pain. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only a choked sound emerged. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself, and he noticed the bruises on her wrists, dark purple marks that stood out starkly against her pale skin. Marcus dropped to one knee beside her, close enough to help, but far enough to give her space. "What happened?" "Everything hurts," she whispered, and the broken quality of her voice made his chest tighten. "Everything hurts, and I cannot make it stop." He studied her more carefully now, cataloging the injuries he could see. A split lip, the bruises on her wrists, scratches on her hands and forearms, dirt under her fingernails like she had been clawing at something. But he suspected the worst of her pain was not the kind he could see with his eyes. "Tell me how I can help," he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "Please, whatever you need." She stared at him for a long moment, searching his face as if trying to determine whether he was real or some cruel trick her exhausted mind was playing on her. Then fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I do not know if anyone can help me anymore. Try me." He reached out slowly, telegraphing his movements, and touched her hand with just his fingertips. "My name is Marcus Cole. I work at the ranch just outside town. I am staying here tonight because my horse threw a shoe and I needed the blacksmith to fix it in the morning. I heard you cry out, and I came running. You are safe now. I promise you that." Something in his tone must have reached her because her shoulders sagged and the tension in her body eased just a fraction. "Natalie?" she whispered. "Natalie Crawford." "Natalie." He said her name like it was something precious. "Can you tell me what happened? Who did this to you?" She closed her eyes, and her face crumpled. "My father. My father did this." The words came out in a rush now, like a dam breaking. "He has been drinking again. He has always had a temper, but tonight it was worse than ever. I tried to stop him from hitting my mother, and he turned on me instead. I ran. I just ran and ran until I could not run anymore, and I found myself here." Marcus felt anger coil in his gut, hot and sharp. He had seen plenty of cruelty in his 26 years, but violence against women was something that turned his blood to ice. "Where is your mother now?" "At home. She told me to run. She screamed at me to go while he was focused on me instead of her." Natalie opened her eyes again, and the guilt in them was almost unbearable to witness. "I left her there with him. What kind of daughter does that make me?" "The kind who wants to survive," Marcus said firmly. "The kind who listened to her mother's wishes. You cannot help her if he hurts you too badly to move. You did the right thing." "It does not feel right." She tried to push herself up from the ground and winced, her hand going to her ribs. "It feels like cowardice." "Let me see." Marcus gestured to her side. "May I?" She hesitated, then nodded. He moved closer, his fingers gentle as he pressed carefully against her ribs through the fabric of her dress. When he reached the left side, she gasped and jerked away. "Might be cracked," he said quietly. "We need to get you to the doctor." "No." The word came out sharp and panicked. "No doctors. My father knows the doctor. He will tell him where I am, and he will come for me, and it will be worse. It is always worse when he has to come looking. Marcus sat back on his heels, thinking. The town doctor was old Thomas Murphy, and he was indeed friendly with half the men in San Angelo, spending his evenings at the saloon, playing cards and trading stories. If Natalie's father was a drinking man, chances were good. They knew each other. "All right," he said. "No doctor, but you cannot stay here either. The stable keeper will be here at dawn, and if your father is looking for you, this will be one of the first places he checks." "Where can I go?" Her voice was so small, so defeated. "I have nowhere, no money, no friends who would dare cross my father." Marcus made a decision in that moment, one he knew might complicate his life in ways he could not yet imagine, but one he also knew he would not regret. "You come with me. I have a small cabin on the ranch where I work. It is nothing fancy, just 2 rooms, but it is clean and safe. You can stay there as long as you need to figure things out." Natalie stared at him like he had just offered her the moon. "You do not even know me. Why would you do this?" "Because it is the right thing to do." He stood and extended his hand to her. "Because no one should have to hurt the way you are hurting right now. And because I grew up with a father who hit my mother, and I swore when I was old enough to make my own choices that I would never stand by and let it happen to someone else if I could prevent it." She looked at his hand for a long moment, then slowly reached out and took it. Her fingers were cold despite the warm June night, and they trembled in his grip. He pulled her carefully to her feet, and she swayed. He caught her around the waist, mindful of her injured ribs, and she leaned against him heavily. "I do not think I can walk very far," she admitted, shame coloring her words. "You do not have to." He glanced around the stable, spotted what he needed. "Wait here." He left her leaning against the stall door and moved quickly to gather supplies. A saddle blanket that was reasonably clean, a canteen of water hanging from a post. When he returned to her, he draped the blanket around her shoulders and handed her the canteen. "Drink." Slowly. She obeyed, taking small sips while he went to the stall where his horse waited. The gelding, a sturdy paint named Jasper, nickered softly as Marcus entered. "I know, boy, I know, but we have to do this." He led Jasper out and got him saddled with practiced efficiency. The horse had not been reshod yet, but the ranch was only 3 miles out of town, and if he kept to the soft dirt at the side of the road, the animal should manage fine. When everything was ready, he turned back to Natalie. "Can you ride?" She nodded, though uncertainty flickered in her eyes. "I used to, when I was younger, before your father took that away too?" Marcus finished softly. Her throat worked as she swallowed. "Yes. Well, tonight we take it back." He moved to her side and helped her toward the horse. "I am going to mount first, then pull you up in front of me. That way I can keep you steady, and you do not have to worry about staying on by yourself, all right?" "All right." He swung into the saddle with the ease of someone who had spent most of his life on horseback, then reached down for her. She gripped his forearm with surprising strength for someone so battered, and he lifted her with one smooth motion, settling her sideways across his lap. She made a small sound of pain as the movement jarred her ribs, but she did not cry out. "Hold on to me," he said, and she wrapped her arms around his torso, pressing her face against his chest. He could feel her heart racing, could feel the tremors that still ran through her body. "I have got you. You are safe now." He urged Jasper forward at a gentle walk, out of the stable and into the night. The moon had risen full and bright, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. San Angelo was quiet this time of night, most folks having retired to their beds hours ago. Only the saloon still showed lights, and he could hear the tinny sound of piano music drifting across the distance. They rode in silence for the first mile, Marcus keeping Jasper to a steady pace that would not jostle Natalie too much. He could feel her beginning to relax against him, exhaustion winning out over fear and pain. Her breathing evened out, became deeper, and he realized she had fallen asleep in his arms. Something stirred in his chest at that, something warm and protective and entirely unexpected. He had known this woman for less than an hour, and yet here she was, trusting him completely in her most vulnerable moment. The weight of that trust settled over him like a mantle, and he found himself making silent promises to her, that he would keep her safe, that he would help her heal, that he would not let her down the way so many others clearly had. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise. a collection of buildings spread out across the Texas prairie. The main house where the owner lived was dark, as were the bunkhouse where the other ranch hands slept. His cabin sat slightly apart from the rest, a small structure he had built himself over the past year with wood he had bought with his wages. It was not much, but it was his, and it represented independence and security in a way nothing else in his life ever had. He guided Jasper up to the cabin and dismounted carefully, keeping Natalie secure in his arms. She stirred but did not wake as he carried her inside, pushing open the door with his shoulder. The interior was dark, but he knew it well enough to navigate by feel alone. He laid her down on his bed, the only bed in the place, and she curled onto her side with a small sigh. Marcus stood there for a moment, watching her in the darkness. Even battered and bruised, even with her hair a tangled mess and her dress torn, there was something striking about her. A delicacy to her features that spoke of good breeding, of a life that should have been filled with pretty things and easy comforts. Instead, she had gotten fists and fear. He turned away and busied himself lighting a lamp, then stoking the small stove in the corner to boil water. He found clean cloths and the medical supplies he kept on hand for the inevitable injuries that came with ranch work. When the water was hot, he poured it into a basin and carried everything over to the bedside. Natalie's eyes fluttered open as he sat down beside her. "Where are we?" "My cabin. You are safe here." He dipped a cloth in the warm water and wrung it out. "I need to clean those cuts before they get infected. May I?" She nodded, and he began with her hands, wiping away the dirt and dried blood with gentle strokes. She watched him work in silence, her storm-gray eyes tracking his every movement. When he reached for her face, she flinched slightly, and he paused. "I will not hurt you," he said softly. "I promise." "I know." She closed her eyes. "I am sorry. My body remembers fear better than my mind remembers kindness these days." The words broke something inside him. He continued cleaning her wounds, and as he worked, she began to talk. The words spilled out of her like water from a broken dam, and he listened to all of it. How her mother had married young to escape poverty, only to discover too late that her husband had demons he drowned in whiskey bottles. How Natalie had grown up learning to read the signs, to know when to make herself scarce, to protect her younger brother as best she could. "Where is your brother now?" Marcus asked as he applied salve to the cut on her lip. Her face crumpled. "He died 2 years ago. Fever took him. He was only 14. She opened her eyes, and they shimmered with tears. "After that, something broke in my father. He had always been hard, always been quick with his fists when he drank, but losing James made him mean. And my mother just gave up. She stopped fighting back, stopped running. She just takes it now, and I hate her for it, and I hate myself for hating her." Marcus set aside the cloth and took her hands in his. "You do not hate her. You hate what has happened to her. There is a difference." "Is there?" Natalie's voice was bitter. "Because from where I stand, it feels the same. Your mother is surviving the only way she knows how. That does not make it right, and it does not mean you have to do the same. You got out. That took courage. Or selfishness. No." He squeezed her hands gently. "Courage. And now you get to decide what comes next. You get to build a life where you do not spend every day afraid, where you do not have to measure your words or monitor someone else's drinking, or plan escape routes from your own home." She searched his face in the lamplight. "Why are you being so kind to me? What do you want from me?" The question was fair, given what she had likely experienced from men in her life. Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Nothing. I want nothing from you except for you to heal. I told you, I grew up watching my mother suffer. I was too young to stop it then, too small to stand between her and my father's fists. But I am not small anymore, and I am not helpless. If I can help you, if I can give you a safe place to recover, then maybe all those years of feeling useless mean something." Natalie's eyes filled with tears again, but these were different from before, softer. "What happened to your mother?" "She left when I was 12, just disappeared one day while my father was out. I always hoped she found somewhere safe, somewhere she could be happy. I never saw her again." His throat tightened at the memory. "My father drank himself to death 3 years later. By then, I was old enough to work, and I have been on my own ever since." "I am sorry," she whispered. "Do not be. I am not." He stood and retrieved a shirt from his small dresser. "Here, Your dress is torn and filthy. You can wear this to sleep in. I will turn around while you change." He moved to face the wall, listening to the rustle of fabric behind him. When she told him it was all right, he turned back to find her swimming in his shirt, the fabric hanging past her knees. She looked impossibly young and vulnerable, and something fierce and protective rose up in him again. "You take the bed," he said. "I will make a pallet on the floor." "I cannot take your bed." "You can and you will. You are injured. You need the rest more than I do." He was already pulling blankets from a trunk, spreading them out on the floor near the stove where the warmth would keep the night chill at bay. No arguments, doctor's orders. "You are not a doctor." "No, but I am the man whose house you are in, and that makes me the boss for tonight." He said it with a small smile, trying to lighten the heavy emotions that filled the small cabin. To his surprise, she smiled back, just a little. It transformed her face, chasing away some of the pain and fear and revealing a glimpse of the woman she might be when she was not broken and hurting. "You are very bossy for someone who just met me. I prefer to think of it as decisive." He settled onto his makeshift bed and turned down the lamp until only a faint glow remained. "Try to sleep, Natalie. Tomorrow we will figure out what comes next." He heard her shift on the bed, heard the old rope frame creak. "Marcus?" "Yes?" "Thank you. For everything. I do not know what would have happened if you had not found me." "You do not have to thank me. Just rest now." Silence fell over the cabin, broken only by the crackling of the fire in the stove and the distant call of a coyote somewhere out on the prairie. Marcus lay on his back, staring up at the dark ceiling, and knew that sleep would be a long time coming. His mind was too full of Natalie, of the feel of her in his arms, of the broken sound of her voice saying everything hurts. He had meant what he told her. He wanted nothing from her except for her to heal. But as he lay there in the darkness, listening to her breathing slow and deepen as she finally surrendered to sleep, he could not help but wonder if the universe had just sent him something he had not even known he was looking for. Morning came with golden light spilling through the cabin's single window and the sound of roosters crowing at the main house. Marcus woke slowly, his body stiff from sleeping on the floor. He pushed himself up and looked toward the bed, but Natalie was still deeply asleep, curled on her side, with one hand tucked under her cheek. The bruises looked worse in the daylight, dark purple and angry against her pale skin. He rose quietly and slipped outside, not wanting to wake her. The morning air was cool and fresh, carrying the scent of sage and dust. He made his way to the well behind the cabin and drew water, splashing it over his face and through his hair. The cold shocked him fully awake, sharpening his thoughts. He needed to get back into town today to have Jasper reshod, but he was reluctant to leave Natalie alone. What if her father came looking? What if she woke in pain and needed help? On the other hand, he could not avoid his responsibilities. The ranch owner, Thomas Garrett, was a fair man, but he expected his workers to pull their weight. Marcus had already taken unexpected time off by not returning to worse last night. He was still pondering the dilemma when the cabin door opened and Natalie emerged, wrapped in a blanket and squinting against the bright morning sun. Her hair was even more tangled than the night before, and she moved stiffly, favoring her injured ribs. "You should still be resting," Marcus said, crossing to her. "I needed to—" She trailed off, color rising in her cheeks. Understanding dawned. "Outhouse is around the back. I will wait here." When she returned a few minutes later, she looked both embarrassed and exhausted. He guided her to the bench he had built beside the cabin door and made her sit. "How do you feel?" "Like I was trampled by a horse." She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "But better than last night. Thank you for letting me stay." "You can stay as long as you need to." He sat beside her, careful to leave space between them. "But I do need to go into town today. I have to get my horse reshod, and I should probably check in with the ranch owner. Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" Fear flickered across her face, but she nodded. "I will be fine. Do what you need to do. If you are feeling up to it, there is a stream about 100 yards that way." He pointed east. "The water is clean and cool. You could wash up if you wanted. There is soap in the cabin, and I can leave you some clean clothes. They will be too big, but at least they are not torn." "That sounds wonderful," she admitted. "I feel like I have been dragged behind a wagon." He went back inside and gathered what she would need: a clean shirt and a pair of his old work pants, a bar of plain soap, a towel. When he brought them to her, she took them with a grateful smile. "I will be back by early afternoon at the latest," he told her. There is food in the cabin, bread and cheese in the cupboard, some dried meat. Help yourself to whatever you want. I do not know how I can ever repay you for this. By taking care of yourself. That is all the payment I need." He touched her shoulder briefly, a gesture of comfort, then headed for the small corral where Jasper waited. The ride into San Angelo gave him time to think. He needed to be careful about this situation. Small towns thrived on gossip, and if word got out that he was harboring someone's daughter in his cabin, there would be talk. The kind of talk that could ruin Natalie's reputation and cost him his job. He would need to be discreet to make sure no one connected her presence at his cabin with her disappearance from town. The blacksmith shop was busy when he arrived, 3 horses already waiting to be shod. Marcus tied Jasper to the hitching post and went inside, the heat from the forge washing over him like a physical wave. The blacksmith, a massive man named Harrison Stone, looked up from the horseshoe he was shaping. "Morning, Marcus. I will get to your horse shortly." "No rush. I will wait." Marcus leaned against the wall, watching the blacksmith work. After a few minutes of silence, he asked casually, "You hear anything interesting in town this morning?" Harrison's hammer rang against the anvil in a steady rhythm. "Crawford is raising hell, if that is what you mean. Stumbled into the saloon at first light, drunk as a lord, asking if anyone had seen his daughter. Says she ran off last night." Marcus kept his expression neutral. "He say why she ran off. Claimed she is ungrateful, that he only disciplined her for talking back, and she made a fuss about it." Harrison paused in his work and looked up, his dark eyes knowing. "But Martha Williams saw Natalie yesterday afternoon at the general store, and she said the girl looked terrified, kept flinching every time someone moved too quick. What is the sheriff doing about it?" "Nothing. Crawford told him it was a family matter, and you know how Parker is, lazy as a hound in summer. He said if the girl shows up, he will send her home, but otherwise he is not wasting his time on it." Harrison returned his attention to the horseshoe. "Between you and me, Crawford is a mean drunk, always has been. Most folks in town know it, but nobody wants to get involved." Marcus absorbed this information silently. At least he knew now that there would be no organized search for Natalie. If her father found her, it would be by chance or through his own efforts. That gave them time to figure out a plan. He spent the next hour helping Harrison with various tasks around the smithy, and by the time Jasper was reshod, the morning was well advanced. He paid the blacksmith and headed for the general store, where he bought supplies he did not really need, just to maintain the appearance of normalcy. Coffee and flour, some canned peaches, a bolt of simple cotton fabric that the storekeeper's wife assured him would make a serviceable dress. It was almost noon by the time he rode back out of San Angelo, his saddlebags heavy with supplies. The sun beat down mercilessly, turning the prairie into a shimmering expanse of gold and brown. He pushed Jasper to a faster pace, suddenly anxious to get back to Natalie, to make sure she was all right. When the cabin came into view, he saw smoke rising from the chimney, which meant she had managed to get the stove going. That was a good sign. He dismounted and carried the supplies inside, calling out so he would not startle her. "Just me." She appeared from the back room, and he stopped in his tracks. She had washed and changed into his clothes, rolling up the pant legs and shirt sleeves so they would not drag on the ground. Her hair was clean and damp, braided in a long plait that hung over her shoulder. Without the dirt and blood, he could see her features more clearly, and he realized with a start that she was beautiful, not in a delicate porcelain doll way, but in a way that spoke of strength beneath fragility, of someone who had endured and survived. "You look better," he said, setting down the supplies. "I feel better." The cold water helped. She moved to the stove, where a pot of something was simmering. "I hope you do not mind. I found some dried beans and salt pork. I thought I would make us something for lunch." "I do not mind at all." He was touched by the gesture, this attempt at normalcy in the midst of chaos. "I brought some things from town, food mostly, and some fabric. I thought maybe you could make yourself a dress that actually fits." Her eyes widened. "You did not have to do that." "I know, I wanted to." He began unpacking the saddlebags, arranging items on the small table. "I also heard some news. Your father was in town this morning, asking around for you, but the sheriff is not organizing a search, says it is a family matter." Natalie's hands stilled on the spoon she was holding. "What will I do? I cannot hide here forever. Eventually someone will see me, or my father will come looking at the ranch, or—" "Stop." Marcus moved to her side. taking the spoon from her shaking hands and setting it down. One thing at a time. Right now, you are safe. We will figure out the rest as we go. She looked up at him, and he saw tears threatening. I feel so helpless. All my life, I have had no control over anything, where I lived, what I did, whether I would be hurt or left alone. And now I have escaped, but I still have no control. I have no money, no skills, nowhere to go. I am completely dependent on your kindness, and while I am grateful, I hate it. I hate feeling this weak. Marcus understood that feeling more than she knew. Then we changed that. You want control? We will get you control. But it takes time and planning. For now, you rest and heal. Once your ribs are better, once the bruises fade, we will work on what comes next. Maybe you could find work in town, save up some money. Or maybe there is somewhere else you could go, somewhere your father would not think to look. I have an aunt in San Antonio, Natalie said slowly. My mother's sister. She and my father had a falling out years ago, and he forbade my mother from contacting her. But I remember her address. She used to send me birthday cards until my father found out and made her stop. Would she take you in? I think so, if I could get to her, if I could explain what happened. Hope bloomed in her gray eyes. San Antonio is big enough that my father would never find me there. I could start over, make a new life. Then that is what we plan for. Marcus felt a strange tightness in his chest at the thought of her leaving, which made no sense. He had just met her. He should be relieved at the prospect of his life returning to normal. San Antonio is about 200 miles from here. That is at least a week of travel, maybe more. You would need money for supplies, for the stage fare if you take the coach, and you need to be healed enough to make the journey. How long will that take? A few weeks, I would guess. Maybe a month. Cracked ribs take time to heal, and you need to rebuild your strength. He saw disappointment cross her face and added, I know it seems like a long time, but it will go faster than you think, and it gives us time to plan properly, to make sure you have everything you need when you go. She nodded slowly. You are right. I am just impatient. I want to be free of him now, not in a few weeks. I know. He picked up the spoon and stirred the pot on the stove. But patience is how we do this right, how we make sure he can never hurt you again. They ate lunch together, the simple meal of beans and salt pork tasting better than it had any right to. Conversation came easier now, flowing naturally between them. She asked about the ranch, and he told her about the work, about the cattle drives and the long days in the saddle. He asked about her childhood, and she shared the good memories, the times before her brother died, when there were still moments of laughter in the Crawford house. As the days turned into a week, then two, a routine developed. Marcus would rise early and go to work at the ranch, putting in long hours to make up for the time he spent at the cabin. He told the other hands that he preferred solitude, that he was working on improving his homestead, which was not entirely untrue. It gave him an excuse to keep to himself, to avoid questions about why he was not spending his evenings in the bunkhouse anymore. Natalie spent her days resting and healing, but also making herself useful. She cleaned the cabin from top to bottom, organized his meager possessions, and began sewing herself a dress from the fabric he had bought. She proved to be an excellent cook, transforming his basic supplies into meals that actually had flavor and variety. By the end of the second week, the bruises had faded to yellow and green, and she could move without wincing every time she breathed. But more than the physical healing, Marcus noticed a change in her spirit. The haunted look in her eyes began to fade. She smiled more, laughed at his terrible jokes, teased him gently about his lack of domestic skills. She was emerging from the shell of fear and pain, revealing the person she was meant to be beneath the damage her father had inflicted. And Marcus found himself falling for her. It was not something he intended or even wanted. He had no business developing feelings for a woman he was supposed to be helping, a woman who needed a protector and a friend, not someone who would complicate her situation further. But feelings, he was discovering, did not care much about logic or propriety. They grew despite his best efforts to contain them, fed by every smile she gave him, every conversation they shared, every moment of companionship that made his small cabin feel like home in a way it never had before. He kept these feelings to himself, locked away where they could not burden her. She had enough to worry about without having to navigate his unwanted affection. Instead, he focused on the practical matter of getting her to San Antonio, saving every spare penny he could toward the cost of her travel. It was the beginning of the third week when everything changed. Marcus had just returned from work, the summer sun setting in a blaze of orange and red on the horizon. He found Natalie outside the cabin, sitting on the bench and staring out at the prairie with an expression he could not quite read. "What is wrong?" he asked, alarm spiking through him. She looked up at him, and he saw confusion in her eyes. "I went to the stream today, like I do every afternoon, but this time I saw someone, a woman from town, Martha Williams. She saw me too." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Did she recognize you?" "I do not think so. I turned away quickly and kept my head down. But she was looking at me, Marcus, really looking. And San Angelo is small. How long before someone puts together that the Crawford girl disappeared the same night you suddenly started keeping to yourself? How long before people start asking questions?" He sat down heavily beside her. "We need to move up the timeline, get you to San Antonio sooner rather than later." "I have been thinking the same thing." She turned to face him fully. "I have also been thinking about something else, about what happens after I leave." "What do you mean?" "I mean that I am going to miss you." The words were simple, but the emotion behind them was anything but. These past few weeks, living here with you, talking with you every evening, learning how to laugh again. Marcus, you have given me so much more than just safety. You have given me myself back, and I do not know how to leave that. How to leave you. His heart hammered against his ribs. "Natalie, let me finish." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I know this is complicated. I know I am supposed to be focused on starting over, on building a life free from my father, and I am focused on that. But I am also focused on the fact that I wake up every morning excited to see you, that I listen for the sound of your horse coming home every evening, that I have started imagining a future that includes you in it." Marcus stared at her, afraid to hope, afraid to believe what he was hearing. "You do not owe me anything," he said carefully. "I helped you because it was right, not because I expected anything in return. I know that. That is part of why I feel this way." She squeezed his hand. "You have asked for nothing. You have given everything. And somewhere in the middle of all that giving, I fell in love with you." The world seemed to stop. The sunset, the prairie, the distant sounds of the ranch, all of it faded away until there was only Natalie and the look in her storm-gray eyes. "You love me?" "I do." She smiled, shaky but real. "I did not plan to. I am not sure it is even smart, given everything. But I do, and I needed you to know before I leave, because I could not bear the thought of walking away without telling you the truth." Marcus lifted his free hand and cupped her face, his thumb brushing gently over her cheekbone. "I love you too. I have been trying not to, but it turns out that is not something you can control. You came into my life broken and hurting, and somehow you have become the best part of every day. The thought of you leaving, of never seeing you again, it tears me apart. Then come with me." The words tumbled out of her in a rush. "Come to San Antonio. We could start over together, build a life where neither of us is running from the past, where we can just be ourselves and see what happens. I cannot just leave. I have my job, my responsibilities here. Do you love this job, this ranch? Or are you here simply because it is easier than starting somewhere new?" She leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his. "I am not asking you to give up something you care about. I am asking you to choose something better. Choose us. Choose the possibility of happiness instead of just security." He had no argument against that. The truth was, he had been drifting for years, working jobs that paid but did not fulfill, staying in places that were comfortable but not home. What did he have here, really? A cabin that would belong to the ranch if he ever left. Co-workers who were friendly but not friends. A routine that numbed more than it satisfied. Natalie was offering him something different, something terrifying and exhilarating and full of potential. She was offering him love. "All right," he heard himself say. "I will come with you. We will go to San Antonio together." The smile that broke across her face was worth every uncertainty, every risk. She threw her arms around his neck, careful of her still healing ribs, and he held her close, breathing in the scent of soap and sunshine that clung to her skin. "Are you sure?" she whispered against his neck. "I do not want you to regret this. I am sure. The only thing I would regret is letting you go." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "I have been alone for a long time, Natalie. I got used to it, convinced myself it was what I wanted. But you showed me what I was missing: connection, partnership, love. I am not giving that up if I do not have to." She kissed him then, soft and tentative, and he felt something click into place inside his chest, like a door closing on his old life and another opening onto his new one. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and the stars had come out overhead, scattered across the sky like diamonds on velvet. "We should start planning," Marcus said, though what he really wanted to do was keep kissing her. "Figure out exactly what we need for the trip." "Tomorrow," Natalie said. "Tonight, let us just sit here and be happy. We can worry about the details in the morning." So they sat on the bench outside his cabin, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist, and watched the night deepen around them. The prairie was full of sounds, the chirp of crickets and the rustle of wind through grass, and above it all, the vast silence of the Texas sky. The next 2 days were a flurry of activity. Marcus gave notice at the ranch, telling Thomas Garrett that he was heading to San Antonio to look for work there. The ranch owner was sorry to see him go, but understanding, and he paid Marcus his final wages along with a small bonus for the work he had done building his cabin. "You are a good man, Marcus Cole," Garrett said as they shook hands. "If things do not work out in San Antonio, you have a place here if you want to come back." "I appreciate that, sir." With the money from his wages and what he had managed to save, Marcus calculated they had just enough for supplies and stage fare for both of them. Natalie had finished her dress, a simple gray cotton that fit her properly and made her look respectable rather than like someone wearing a man's cast-offs. She pinned up her hair and practiced looking confident, even when she admitted she was terrified. "What if my father is watching the stage depot?" she asked the night before they planned to leave. "Then we deal with it," Marcus said, though he had been worrying about the same thing. "But I think it is unlikely. It has been 3 weeks. He probably thinks you ran off to some neighboring town, or that you are dead in a ditch somewhere. Men like him do not usually have the patience for long-term searching." "I hope you are right." They decided to take the early morning stage, the one that left at dawn before most of the town was awake. It would mean less chance of being seen, less opportunity for someone to recognize Natalie and alert her father. Marcus sold Jasper to a neighboring rancher for a fair price, sad to lose the horse, but needing the extra funds more than he needed the sentiment. The night before they left, they lay together on his bed, fully clothed, but wrapped in each other's arms. Neither of them slept much, both too aware that the next day would determine their future, one way or another. "I am scared," Natalie admitted in the darkness. "Me too." Marcus pressed a kiss to her forehead. "But we will be scared together, and that makes it bearable. Do you really think we can make this work? Build a life in a strange city with nothing but hope and a small amount of money? People have built lives on less." He stroked her hair, the braid already coming loose from hours of restless movement. "And we have more than just hope. We have each other. That counts for something." She was quiet for a long moment, then said, "When we get to San Antonio, after we find my aunt and make sure I am settled, I want to marry you. Is that too forward? Should I wait for you to ask?" Marcus felt joy flood through him, warm and bright. "I was planning to ask you myself, but I appreciate you taking the initiative. Yes, Natalie, when we get to San Antonio, I will marry you. Nothing would make me happier." She tilted her face up and kissed him, deeper this time, with a passion that promised a future full of heat and tenderness. They stayed like that for a long time, learning the taste and texture of each other, until exhaustion finally pulled them both under into sleep. Dawn came too quickly. They dressed in silence, the gravity of what they were about to do settling over them like a heavy cloak. Marcus packed their few belongings into a worn carpet bag, while Natalie pinned her hair up carefully, arranging it so that it hid as much of her face as possible without looking obviously suspicious. The walk into San Angelo took 40 minutes, and every step felt like walking through honey, slow and thick with tension. The town was just beginning to wake, shopkeepers opening their doors, the smell of fresh bread drifting from the bakery. The stage depot was at the far end of the main street, a small building with a bench outside and a tired-looking man behind the counter. Marcus bought their tickets while Natalie waited outside, keeping her back to the street. The stage itself was already being prepared, 2 horses being hitched to the worn coach. There were 3 other passengers waiting, a middle-aged woman and her 2 children, all of them looking rumpled and sleepy. "We board in 5 minutes," Marcus told Natalie quietly. "Just 5 more minutes, and we are gone." Those 5 minutes felt like an eternity. Every sound made Natalie flinch. Every person who walked by was potentially her father, or someone who would recognize her. Marcus stood close to her, using his body to shield her from view as much as possible. Then the driver called for boarding, and they were climbing into the coach, taking seats near the back. The mother and children settled across from them, the woman giving them a polite nod before busying herself with getting her children comfortable. The driver finished loading luggage onto the roof, then climbed up to his seat. The stage lurched into motion, wheels creaking, and Marcus felt Natalie's hand find his beneath the folds of her skirt. He squeezed back, a silent message of support and solidarity. They rolled down the main street of San Angelo, past the general store and the saloon and the church where Natalie had probably been forced to sit through sermons every Sunday. They were almost to the edge of town when a man stepped into the road, holding up his hand. The driver pulled the horses to a stop, cursing under his breath. What is the meaning of this? Marcus felt Natalie go rigid beside him. He looked out the window and saw a man in his 50s, heavy-set with a red face and bloodshot eyes. He was dressed in a suit that had seen better days, and he reeked of whiskey even from a distance. "My daughter," the man said, his voice slurred. "Someone told me they saw her this morning, heading for the stage. I need to check the passengers." The driver sighed. "Make it quick. I am on a schedule." Marcus's mind raced. If Crawford got a good look inside the coach, he would recognize Natalie immediately. There was nowhere to hide, nowhere to run. His hand moved instinctively to his belt, where he kept a knife for practical purposes. He was not a violent man, but he would fight if he had to. He would not let this monster take Natalie back. Crawford stumbled toward the coach door. The mother across from them clutched her children closer, sensing danger. Natalie's breathing had gone shallow and rapid, and Marcus could feel her trembling. The door swung open, and Crawford's bleary eyes swept the interior of the coach. They passed over the mother and children, dismissing them immediately. Then they landed on Natalie. Recognition dawned, along with rage. "You!" "Sir, you need to step away from the coach," the driver called. "You are holding up my schedule." "That is my daughter," Crawford snarled, "and she is coming home with me." "No." Marcus's voice came out hard and cold, a tone he rarely used but which carried absolute authority. "No, she is not." Crawford's attention swung to him. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows what you did to her, and I am not letting you lay another hand on her." Marcus started to rise, ready to put himself between Natalie and her father. But before he could stand fully, the mother across from them spoke up, her voice clear and strong. "This man is bothering us, driver. Can you please remove him? My children are frightened." The driver, a grizzled man who had probably seen every kind of trouble the frontier had to offer, seemed to make a decision. "You heard the lady. Step away from the coach, or I will make you step away." "She is my daughter," Crawford repeated, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "I have a right. You have no rights here." The driver climbed down from his seat, revealing a shotgun that he carried for protecting against bandits. "Now, move along, or I will have the sheriff deal with you." For a moment, Marcus thought Crawford would charge the coach anyway, would try to drag Natalie out by force. But the sight of the shotgun and the gathering crowd of curious townspeople seemed to penetrate his drunken haze. He took a step back, his face mottling with impotent fury. "This is not over," he said, pointing at Natalie. "You hear me? This is not over." "Yes, it is." Natalie's voice was shaky but determined. She leaned forward so he could see her face clearly. "I am leaving, and I am never coming back. Whatever power you had over me is gone. You will never hurt me again." Crawford opened his mouth, then closed it. Something in Natalie's eyes must have communicated the finality of her decision, because he took another step back. "Ungrateful wretch, after everything I did for you." "Everything you did to me, you mean?" Natalie sat back, and Marcus put his arm around her. "Goodbye, father." The driver slammed the coach door shut and climbed back to his seat. With a snap of the reins, the stage lurched forward again, leaving Crawford standing in the dust of the road. Marcus watched through the back window as the man grew smaller and smaller, until finally he was just a speck, and then nothing at all. The tension in the coach slowly dissipated. The mother across from them gave Natalie a sympathetic look. "Are you all right, dear?" "I am now." Natalie leaned into Marcus's side, and he felt the tremors still running through her body. "Thank you for speaking up. You did not have to do that." "Of course I did. I have daughters of my own. I know a brute when I see one." The woman settled back in her seat. "You are very brave." "I do not feel brave." "Courage is not the absence of fear," the woman said gently. "It is acting despite the fear, and you just did that. Be proud of yourself." They rode in silence for a while after that, the coach rocking with the movement of the horses. San Angelo disappeared behind them, and with it, the last physical tie Natalie had to her old life. Marcus watched her face, saw the emotions playing across it, fear and relief and sorrow, all mixed together. "You did it," he said quietly. "You stood up to him. You got away." "We got away," she corrected, finding his hand again. "I could not have done this without you." The journey to San Antonio took 5 days, stopping each night at way stations along the route. They shared rooms at these stations, claiming to be married to avoid scandal, and each night Marcus held Natalie as she processed what had happened. Sometimes she cried, sometimes she was angry, sometimes she was simply quiet, lost in thoughts she did not share. And through it all, he was there, a steady presence offering comfort and support. By the 3rd day, the fear began to fade from her eyes, replaced by something new: excitement, hope. The future was spreading out before them, like the Texas landscape, wide and open and full of possibility. They arrived in San Antonio on a hot afternoon, the city bustling with activity that was overwhelming after weeks in a small cabin and the quiet of San Angelo. The streets were crowded with wagons and horses, people shouting in English and Spanish, the smell of cooking food and unwashed bodies and horse manure all blending together in an assault on the senses. "It is so big," Natalie breathed, staring out the coach window with wide eyes. "It is," Marcus agreed. "Are you ready for this?" She squared her shoulders. "Yes, let us find my aunt." It took most of the afternoon, asking directions from strangers and navigating the confusing streets, but eventually they found the address Natalie remembered from those long-ago birthday cards. It was a small but tidy house on the outskirts of the city, with a garden out front and lace curtains in the windows. Natalie stood on the walkway, staring at the house like it might disappear if she blinked. What if she does not remember me? What if she will not help? Then we figure something else out. Marcus took her hand. But I think she will help. Family is family. Natalie took a deep breath and walked up to the door. Her knock was tentative, but it was answered quickly by a woman in her 40s with graying hair and eyes the same storm gray as Natalie's. The woman's hand flew to her mouth. "Natalie, is that really you?" "Hello, Aunt Catherine." Catherine pulled Natalie into a fierce hug, and suddenly Natalie was crying, all the emotion of the past weeks pouring out in great heaving sobs. Catherine held her tight, murmuring soothing words, and when she looked up and saw Marcus standing awkwardly on the walkway, she beckoned him forward. Come in, both of you. You look exhausted." Inside, the house was cozy and welcoming, filled with the smell of something savory cooking. Catherine settled them in her small parlor and brought them water and fresh bread while Natalie told her story. She left nothing out, describing her father's violence, her escape, Marcus's intervention, their journey to San Antonio. By the end, Catherine was crying too. "I should have done more," she said, wiping her eyes. "I should have fought harder to stay in your life. But your father forbade it, and your mother would not go against him." "It was not your fault," Natalie assured her. "None of this was your fault. But I am here now, and I need help. I need a place to stay while Marcus and I get on our feet. I will work. I will pay rent as soon as I can. I just need a chance." "Of course you can stay, for as long as you need." Catherine looked at Marcus. "Both of you, you saved my niece's life. That makes you family as far as I am concerned." The relief was palpable. Marcus felt years of tension draining out of his shoulders. They had made it. They were safe. They were. That evening, after a dinner that was the best meal either of them had eaten in weeks, Catherine showed them to a spare room. It was small but clean, with a real bed and a window that looked out over the garden. "I hope this will be comfortable for you." "It is perfect," Natalie said. "Thank you, Aunt Catherine, for everything." When they were alone, Marcus and Natalie stood in the middle of the room, looking at each other. They had been through so much in such a short time, had built something strong and true out of pain and desperation. "We did it," Natalie said, wonder in her voice. "We actually did it." "We did." Marcus pulled her close, resting his chin on top of her head. "We started a new life, together." "I love you, Marcus Cole." "I love you too, Natalie Crawford, soon to be Natalie Cole, if you will still have me." She pulled back and looked up at him, her gray eyes clear and certain. "I will have you, today, tomorrow, and every day after that." They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at the local church, with Catherine and a few of her friends as witnesses. Natalie wore a dress Catherine had made for her, pale blue with tiny white flowers embroidered on the bodice. Marcus wore his best shirt and pants, his hair neatly combed and his boots polished to a shine. They exchanged vows in front of a priest who did not know their story, who saw only two young people in love, and maybe that was enough. After the ceremony, Catherine hosted a small celebration at her house. Neighbors came by to offer congratulations and bring food, and for the first time in her life, Natalie experienced what it felt like to be part of a community that cared, that celebrated joy rather than enabling cruelty. As the sun set and the guests filtered away, Marcus and Natalie stood in the garden, watching fireflies dance among the flowers. She leaned against him, her head on his shoulder, and he wrapped his arms around her waist. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible." She turned in his arms to face him. "A few weeks ago, I thought my life was over, that I would be trapped forever in that house, suffocating under my father's control. And now, look at me. Married to the man I love, living in a city where no one knows my past, with my whole future ahead of me. It is like a dream." "It is not a dream." He kissed her softly. "It is real. We made it real." They stayed in Catherine's house for 3 months, while they saved money and established themselves in San Antonio. Marcus found work at a large ranch outside the city, using his experience with horses and cattle to earn a decent wage. Natalie got a job at a dress shop, using the sewing skills she had learned from her mother to alter and repair clothing for wealthy clients. The work was honest, the pay was fair, and best of all, they were together. Catherine was delighted to have them, insisting they were no burden at all. In fact, she seemed to thrive on having people to care for again. Her own children were grown and gone, scattered across Texas, pursuing their own lives, and she had been lonely. Natalie filled that void, and the two women grew close in a way Natalie had never been close with her own mother. One evening, about 4 months after their arrival in San Antonio, Natalie came home from the dress shop with an unusual expression on her face. Marcus, who had become expert at reading her moods, looked up from the newspaper he was reading. "What is it?" She sat down beside him on the small sofa they had bought for their room. "I am with child." For a moment, Marcus could not process the words. Then joy, pure and overwhelming, flooded through him. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be. I missed my monthly courses and I have been feeling sick in the mornings. Mrs. Henderson at the dress shop said those are sure signs." She searched his face anxiously. "Are you happy? I know we have not been married long, and we are still getting settled." He kissed her, cutting off her worried rambling. "I am so happy I do not have words for it. A baby, our baby. Natalie, this is wonderful." Relief and joy mingled on her face. "I was hoping you would say that. I am terrified, but I am also excited. We are going to be parents." "We are going to be amazing parents," he corrected, "because we know exactly what not to do. Our child is going to grow up knowing they are loved and safe and valued, always." Catherine was equally thrilled when they told her, immediately beginning to knit tiny clothes and blankets. The months of Natalie's pregnancy passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Marcus worked extra hours to save money, determined to have enough to move into their own place before the baby arrived. Natalie continued at the dress shop until the owner's wife insisted she stay home and rest for the final month. Their son was born on a clear March morning in 1879, coming into the world with a lusty cry that announced his presence to everyone within earshot. Marcus held him for the first time and felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. This tiny, wrinkled creature was his son, his responsibility, and his joy. They named him James, after Natalie's brother, and the first time Natalie held him, she wept with a complicated mix of grief and happiness. "I wish my mother could see him," she admitted. "I wish things had been different." "I know." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed beside her, one arm around her shoulders while she cradled James against her chest. "But your mother made her choices, just like you made yours. You cannot save someone who will not save themselves." "Do you think she is all right?" "I do not know." It was the truth. They had heard nothing from San Angelo in the months since they left. No news of whether Crawford had continued his reign of terror, whether Natalie's mother was still alive, whether anyone had asked questions about where Natalie had gone. It was like they had stepped out of one life and into another, and the door had closed firmly behind them. "But I know you are all right, and James is all right, and that is what matters." She nodded slowly, accepting this truth even as it pained her. Then she looked down at their son, and her face transformed with love. "He is perfect, is he not?" "He is." Marcus reached out and touched James's tiny hand, marveling when the infant's fingers curled around his. "He is absolutely perfect." A month after James was born, they moved into their own house. It was small, just 4 rooms in a quiet neighborhood, but it was theirs. They furnished it slowly, piece by piece, choosing items together and building a home that reflected both of them. Natalie hung curtains she had sewn herself. Marcus built a cradle for James and a table for the kitchen. Catherine visited often, spoiling her great-nephew shamelessly and offering advice that was usually helpful. Life settled into a rhythm. Marcus continued working at the ranch, earning promotions and raises as his skill and dedication became apparent. Natalie returned to the dress shop part-time once James was old enough, bringing in extra income that they saved carefully. They made friends in their neighborhood, other young families who were also building lives in the growing city. For the first time in either of their lives, they felt like they belonged somewhere. When James was 2, Natalie became pregnant again. This time, they were prepared, excited rather than overwhelmed. Their daughter was born on a warm September day, quiet where her brother had been loud, observant where he was boisterous. They named her Catherine, after the aunt who had given them a chance at a new life, and both Catherines cried when they heard. The years passed, each one bringing new challenges and joys. James grew into a bright, curious boy who followed his father around whenever possible, soaking up knowledge about horses and ranching. Little Catherine was more reserved, but possessed a sharp intelligence that reminded Marcus of her mother. When she was 4, another son arrived, whom they named Samuel. 2 years after that, a second daughter, Elizabeth. Their house was full of noise and laughter and love, everything Marcus and Natalie had been denied in their own childhoods. They were determined to give their children something better, and they poured themselves into that mission. Family dinners every night where everyone shared their day, bedtime stories and lullabies, discipline that was fair and consistent but never harsh. Above all, an environment where the children knew they were valued and safe. On quiet evenings after the children were in bed, Marcus and Natalie would sit together on the porch they had built onto the back of the house. They would hold hands and talk about everything and nothing, and sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence, watching the stars come out over San Antonio. "Do you ever think about San Angelo?" Natalie asked one such evening when they had been married for 8 years. "About what we left behind?" Marcus considered the question. "Sometimes, but not with regret. More like remembering a story I heard once, something that happened to someone else. I feel the same way." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "That girl who was crying in the stable, so broken she could not imagine a way forward, she feels like a different person. Like someone I used to know but am not anymore." "You are still her," Marcus said gently. "Just the version of her that got to heal and grow. That got to become who she was always meant to be." "And who is that?" "A mother, a wife, a survivor, a woman who is stronger than she knows." He kissed the top of her head. "My partner in everything, the love of my life." She tilted her face up and kissed him properly. Even after 8 years of marriage, the spark between them had not dimmed. If anything, it had grown stronger, tempered by shared experiences, and deepened by true partnership. "I love you, Marcus Cole. Thank you for finding me that night. Thank you for helping me. Thank you for choosing me." "I would choose you every time," he said. "In every version of this life, I would choose you." They sat there as the night deepened around them, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built something luminous together. Behind them, in the house they had made into a home, their children slept safely. Ahead of them stretched years of life still to be lived, challenges still to be faced, joys still to be discovered. But they would face it all together, and that made everything possible. The years continued to unfold with a steady grace that both Marcus and Natalie had learned never to take for granted. By the time their eldest, James, turned 10 in 1889, Marcus had been promoted to foreman at the ranch where he worked. It was a position of significant responsibility, overseeing 24 ranch hands and managing the day-to-day operations of nearly 5,000 acres of grazing land. The pay was good, better than he had ever imagined earning, and it allowed them to move to a larger house with enough bedrooms for each of the children to have their own space. Natalie had transitioned from working at the dress shop to taking in sewing at home, which allowed her to earn money while still being present for the children. Her reputation for quality work had spread, and she found herself in demand among San Antonio's wealthier families, creating custom dresses and suits that commanded premium prices. Between her income and Marcus's salary, they were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable, secure in a way neither of them had ever experienced growing up. Catherine, now in her 60s, remained a constant presence in their lives. She had moved to a smaller house just 3 streets away, close enough to visit daily, but far enough to maintain her independence. She watched the children when Marcus and Natalie both needed to work, and she taught the girls to bake and the boys to be gentlemen. Her influence on the family was immeasurable, and both Marcus and Natalie made sure to tell her so regularly. One spring afternoon, when the bluebonnets were blooming across the Texas hills and the air was sweet with the scent of new growth, a letter arrived that changed everything. It was addressed to Natalie, and the return address was San Angelo. Her hands shook as she opened it, and Marcus came to stand beside her, reading over her shoulder. The letter was from the pastor of the church Natalie's family had attended. In careful, formal language, he informed her that her father had died 3 weeks prior, having finally drunk himself into oblivion. But more importantly, her mother was still alive and was asking for her. She was ill, the pastor wrote, and growing weaker by the day. She wished to see her daughter one last time before she passed. Natalie read the letter twice, then set it down with trembling hands. "I do not know what to feel," she admitted. "Part of me wants to go, to see her one last time, but part of me is still angry, still hurt by the fact that she never left him, never chose me." Marcus pulled her close. "Whatever you decide, I will support you. If you want to go, we will go. If you want to stay here, we will stay. There is no right or wrong answer." She was quiet for a long time, her face pressed against his chest. Finally, she said, "I need to go, not for her sake, or even for mine, but for our children's sake. I want them to understand that people are complicated, that love and pain can exist side by side, and that sometimes you do things not because they are easy, but because they are necessary." So, they made arrangements. Catherine agreed to watch the younger children, while Marcus and Natalie took James, now old enough to understand the journey's significance, with them to San Angelo. They traveled by train this time, the railroad having finally extended its reach to the small town, and the journey that had once taken 5 days by stage now took less than 2. San Angelo had grown in the 11 years since they had left. New buildings lined the main street, and the population had nearly doubled. But the core of the town was still the same, still carried that familiar feel that made Natalie's shoulders tense as they stepped off the train. They went directly to the house where Natalie had grown up, a small structure on the poor side of town that looked even more dilapidated than Natalie remembered. The paint had peeled away in long strips, and the porch sagged dangerously. But smoke rose from the chimney, indicating someone was home. Natalie stood at the gate, gathering her courage. Marcus stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, while James watched with wide, curious eyes. Finally, she pushed open the gate and walked up to the door. Her knock was answered by a woman Natalie barely recognized. Her mother had aged decades in the years since she had last seen her. Her hair, once dark like Natalie's, was completely gray. Her face was lined and thin, her body skeletal beneath a faded dress. But her eyes, when they landed on Natalie, were the same storm gray, and they filled with tears. "Natalie," she breathed, "you came. You asked me to." Natalie's voice was carefully neutral, not warm, but not cold either. "This is my husband, Marcus, and our son, James." Her mother's gaze moved to Marcus, and something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or understanding. You are the one who helped her, who took her away. I am, Marcus said simply. Then I owe you more thanks than I can ever express. She stepped back from the door. Please, come in. I do not have much to offer, but you are welcome here. The interior of the house was as worn as the exterior, but it was clean. Natalie's mother had always been fastidious about cleanliness, even when everything else was falling apart. She made tea, her hands shaking with weakness, and they sat around the small table where Natalie had eaten countless meals in silence and fear. I am dying, her mother said without preamble. Cancer, the doctor says. I have a few weeks at most. I wanted to see you before I went, to tell you things I should have said years ago. Natalie said nothing, just waited. I am sorry. The words came out broken, heavy with regret. I am sorry I was not stronger. Sorry I could not protect you from your father. Sorry I told you to run instead of running with you. I have spent every day since you left, wondering if you were all right, if you were even alive, and I have spent every day hating myself for not having the courage you had. Why did you not leave? Natalie asked, and the pain in her voice was evident. Why did you stay with him, even after what he did to me, to James? Her mother closed her eyes. Because I was afraid. Because I convinced myself that I had nowhere to go, no way to support myself. Because after years of being told I was worthless, I believed it. I know these are not good reasons. I know they do not excuse what I did or failed to do. But they are the truth. He is dead now, Natalie said. You are free. Does that not count for something? It counts for nothing when I am dying too. Her mother opened her eyes again, and they were full of sorrow. But seeing you here, seeing that you made a life for yourself, that you found love and had a family, that gives me peace. It tells me that at least one person escaped, at least one person got to be happy. Natalie felt tears spilling down her cheeks. She had thought she was past this, past the pain of her childhood, but seeing her mother like this, broken and dying, brought it all rushing back. I wanted you to escape with me. I wanted to save you. I know, but I could not be saved, Natalie. Some people cannot be. That was never your fault, and it was never your responsibility. Her mother reached across the table with a trembling hand, and after a moment, Natalie took it. But you saved yourself, and that is the most important thing. You broke the cycle. Your children will never know the fear you knew. That is a gift beyond measure. They spent the afternoon together, talking in a way they had never been able to when Natalie was young. Her mother asked about the children, about their life in San Antonio, and Natalie found herself sharing details she had not expected to share. Marcus and James sat quietly, bearing witness to this reunion, this reckoning with the past. As the sun began to set, Natalie's mother grew tired. They helped her to her bed, and she clutched Natalie's hand with surprising strength. Will you forgive me? She asked. Not now, perhaps, but someday? Natalie looked at this woman who had given her life but had not been able to protect it. I am working on it, she said honestly. I cannot promise I am there yet, but I am trying. That is enough. Her mother smiled, and for just a moment, Natalie could see a glimpse of the woman she might have been in a different life. That is more than enough. They stayed in San Angelo for 3 more days, visiting Natalie's mother each afternoon. On the 4th day, they received word that she had passed peacefully in her sleep. Natalie wept, but Marcus noticed that alongside the grief, there was also something like relief, a closing of a chapter, an ending that allowed for new beginnings. They arranged for a simple funeral, paid for with money they could ill afford, but which Natalie insisted on providing. A handful of townspeople attended, mostly out of obligation or curiosity. The pastor who had written the letter spoke kind words about God's mercy and forgiveness, and Natalie stood between Marcus and James, her family, and felt grounded in a way she had not expected. After the funeral, as they were preparing to return to the train station, an elderly woman approached them. Natalie recognized her as one of the neighbors from her childhood, a kind woman who had occasionally slipped her extra food when times were particularly hard. I am glad you got out, the woman said, patting Natalie's hand. I always hoped you would. You were too bright, too full of life, to be crushed by that house. Your mother talked about you, you know, in the years after you left. She was proud of you, even though she never said it to your face. Thank you for telling me that, Natalie said, her voice thick with emotion. On the train ride back to San Antonio, James asked the question Natalie had been dreading. "Why did grandfather hurt you and grandmother?" Natalie exchanged a glance with Marcus, then took her son's hand. Because he was sick in a way that had nothing to do with his body. He was sick in his heart and his mind, and he chose to let that sickness control him instead of fighting it. But here is what you need to understand, James. That sickness is not passed down in blood. It is a choice, and you get to choose differently. You get to choose to be kind, to be gentle, to be strong in ways that do not require hurting others. James absorbed this seriously. "I will choose to be like Father," he said finally, "strong and kind." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. He ruffled his son's hair. That is all anyone can ask. When they returned home, the younger children rushed to greet them, full of stories about what they had done with Aunt Catherine. The house was full of noise and life and normalcy, and Natalie stood in the middle of it all, feeling the weight of the past few days begin to lift. That night, after the children were in bed, she and Marcus sat on their back porch, as they had done countless times before. "I am glad we went," she said. "I needed to see her, to hear her say she was sorry. But I am also glad to be home. This is where I belong, with you, with our children, in the life we built." "You have come so far from that girl in the stable," Marcus said, pulling her close. "I am in awe of you, Natalie, of your strength, your capacity for love, despite everything you endured. You are the strongest person I know." "I am only strong because you gave me room to be," she replied. "You never demanded anything of me. You just offered support and let me find my own way. That is a gift I will never be able to repay." "You repay it every day," he assured her, "by being here, by choosing us, choosing this life, choosing to be happy. That is all I ever wanted." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge one by one. The past was behind them now, truly behind them. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility and promise. Their children would grow and have children of their own. The family they had started would continue, carrying forward the lessons of love and resilience that Marcus and Natalie had learned so painfully. As the years continued to pass, this is exactly what happened. James grew into a fine young man who studied law and became an advocate for women and children facing violence in their homes. Catherine followed her grandmother's footsteps into teaching, educating the next generation with patience and wisdom. Samuel took after his father, working with horses and eventually starting his own ranch. Elizabeth, the youngest, surprised everyone by developing a talent for medicine, becoming one of the first female doctors in San Antonio. Marcus and Natalie watched all of this with pride and wonder. They grew old together, their hair graying, their faces lining, but their love never diminishing. If anything, it deepened with each passing year, becoming something solid and unshakable, the foundation upon which their entire family was built. On their 30th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party. The house was filled with grandchildren by then, 7 in total, with more on the way. Catherine, now in her 90s but still sharp as ever, sat in the place of honor, beaming at the family that had sprung from the chance she had taken on a desperate niece and the man who loved her. As the celebration wound down and the guests filtered away, Marcus and Natalie found themselves alone on that same back porch, in the same chairs they had occupied for decades. They were both in their 50s now, their bodies showing the wear of hard-working lives, but their eyes still sparkled when they looked at each other. "Do you remember that night?" Natalie asked. "When you found me in the stable?" "Every detail," Marcus said. "You were so broken, so scared. I remember thinking I would do anything to help you, even though I had just met you. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not come running when you heard me cry out? If you had stayed on that porch with your coffee and ignored the noise?" "No," he said firmly, "because I do not believe in that version of the world. Some things are meant to happen. We were meant to find each other. We were meant to build this life, this family. I have never doubted that." She leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting against him the way she had for 3 decades. "I used to think everything hurt. That pain was all there was, all there would ever be. But you showed me different. You showed me that love could heal, that kindness could rebuild what cruelty had destroyed. You saved my life that night, Marcus. Not just physically, but in every way that matters." "And you saved mine," he replied. "I was drifting before I met you, going through the motions but never really living. You gave me purpose, gave me something to care about beyond just surviving. We saved each other. They sat there as the night deepened, two people who had started with nothing and built everything. Behind them, their house was full of evidence of the life they had created. Photographs on the walls showing their children at various ages, hand-sewn quilts draped over furniture, books and toys, and all the detritus of a family well loved. Ahead of them stretched whatever years they had remaining, and neither of them knew how many that would be. But they knew those years would be spent together, supporting each other, loving each other, continuing to build on the foundation they had laid that night in the stable so long ago. As the stars came out over San Antonio, the same stars that had watched over them for 30 years, Marcus took Natalie's hand and held it tight. She squeezed back, and in that simple gesture was everything they had been, everything they were, and everything they would be. Two people who had found each other in darkness and chosen to walk toward the light together. Two people who had taken pain and transformed it into love. Two people who had proved that no matter how broken you are, no matter how much everything hurts, there is always hope for healing if you find the right person to help you through. Their story, which had started with tears and fear, had become something beautiful, something lasting, something that would echo through generations, a testament to the power of choosing kindness, choosing love, choosing to help someone in their darkest moment. And as they sat there on that porch, hands entwined, hearts beating in synchronized rhythm, they knew without question that they had lived the life they were meant to live, together. The seasons continued their eternal dance, and Marcus and Natalie Cole settled into the gentle rhythm of their later years with the same grace they had brought to every other phase of their life together. By 1895, when Natalie turned 44 and Marcus 46, they were grandparents 7 times over, with their eldest grandchild already 10 years old and full of the same determination that had characterized her grandmother's escape from San Angelo all those years ago. Their home had become the gathering place for the entire family, the anchor point where everyone returned for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations. The house they had bought when James was young had been expanded twice over the years, adding rooms as their needs and means had grown. Now it featured a long dining table that Marcus had built himself, capable of seating 16 people comfortably, which was necessary given the size their family had reached. Marcus had retired from active ranch work 2 years prior, his body finally insisting that decades of hard labor had taken their toll. But retirement had not meant idleness. The ranch owner, recognizing Marcus's invaluable knowledge and experience, had asked him to stay on as a consultant, helping to train younger foremen and advising on major decisions. The work was lighter, but still meaningful, and it gave Marcus purpose without breaking his body further. Natalie had also scaled back her sewing work, taking on only the occasional special project that interested her. Instead, she had devoted her time to a cause that had become deeply important to her over the years. She volunteered at a home for women and children fleeing violent situations, offering them not just her skills with a needle, but her story, her proof that it was possible to escape and build a new life. She sat with frightened women and told them about the night she had cried in a stable, about the man who had asked how he could help, about the journey from pain to peace. She gave them hope, and there was no more valuable gift. James, now 26, had recently married a kind young woman named Sarah, and they had just announced they were expecting their first child. Catherine had become a beloved teacher at one of San Antonio's growing schools, known for her patience and her refusal to tolerate bullying of any kind. Samuel was making a success of his small ranch, using techniques he had learned from his father to raise some of the finest horses in the region. And Elizabeth, brilliant Elizabeth, had completed her medical training and was now working at a clinic that specialized in treating women and children, carrying on her mother's mission in her own way. Aunt Catherine, who had reached the venerable age of 93, still lived independently, but spent most of her days at Marcus and Natalie's house, claiming she needed the noise and chaos to feel alive. Her mind remained sharp, though her body had grown frail, and she delighted in holding her great-great-grandchildren, marveling at how far the family had come from that desperate day when Natalie had shown up on her doorstep. One autumn evening, when the air had finally cooled from the summer's fierce heat and the leaves were just beginning to turn, the entire family gathered for a dinner celebrating Marcus and Natalie's 32nd anniversary. The house was full to bursting, children running through rooms while adults chatted and laughed, and the smell of Natalie's famous pot roast filled every corner. After dinner, as was tradition, the family gathered in the large sitting room. James stood and cleared his throat, getting everyone's attention. "Sarah and I have an announcement," he said, his arm around his wife's waist. "We have decided on a name for the baby. If it is a girl, we will name her Natalie Catherine, after the two strongest women we know. And if it is a boy, we will name him Marcus James, after the two strongest men." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Natalie felt tears streaming down her face, and when she looked at Marcus, she saw his eyes were wet too. To know that their names, their story, would continue into the next generation was overwhelming in the best possible way. Later, after most of the family had departed and only James and Sarah remained to help clean up, James pulled his parents aside. "I need to tell you both something," he said, his expression serious. "I received a letter today from a colleague in San Angelo. He has been working on a case involving a family situation, much like what Mother experienced. The man, the father, he cited grandfather's death as precedent, saying that what happens in a family is private and the law has no right to interfere." Natalie felt her stomach clench. "What did your colleague say?" "He argued that times have changed, that we now recognize that violence against women and children is a crime, not a private matter. He cited Mother's case, actually, not by name, but the story of a young woman who fled her father's abuse and built a successful life. He said that if we had laws protecting women then, more of them might have the courage to leave." James looked at his mother with pride and love. "Your story is helping people, Mother, even now, even after all these years." Natalie could not speak past the lump in her throat. Marcus put his arm around her and addressed his son. "Did your colleague win the case?" "He did. The judge ruled that the father's custody rights were forfeit due to his violence, and the mother was granted the authority to leave with her children. It is a precedent that will help countless other women." James squeezed his mother's hand. "You started something when you ran that night. You showed that it was possible to escape, to survive, to thrive. That matters more than you know." After James and Sarah left, Marcus and Natalie sat together in the quiet house, processing what their son had told them. "I never thought about it that way," Natalie said. "I always saw my escape as something personal, something that only affected me and later our family. But the idea that it could help others, that it could change laws and attitudes, that is extraordinary." "You are extraordinary," Marcus said simply. "You always have been. From the moment you found the courage to run, you were changing the world. Everything that came after, our marriage, our children, the work you do with abused women, it all flows from that moment of bravery." She turned to look at him, this man who had been her partner for more than 3 decades. His hair was now more gray than brown, and his face was lined with wrinkles earned through years of outdoor work and easy laughter. But his eyes were the same, warm and steady and full of love. "I could not have done any of it without you. You were the one who asked how you could help. You were the one who gave me space to heal and grow. Every good thing in my life flows from your kindness that night." "We helped each other," Marcus said, as he always did when she tried to give him too much credit. "That is what love is. Two people helping each other become the best versions of themselves." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Natalie said, "I want to write it down, our story, not for publication or anything like that, but for our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, so they know where they came from, what we overcame, so they understand that no matter how dark things seem, there is always hope." "That is a beautiful idea," Marcus agreed. "When will you start?" "Tomorrow." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "But tonight, I just want to sit here with you and be grateful for every moment that brought us to this point." And so they did. Two people who had started with nothing but pain and fear, and who had built something magnificent through love and determination and unwavering support for each other. The house around them was quiet now, but it held the echoes of all the life that had filled it over the years, all the love and laughter and family dinners. It was a home in the truest sense, built not just with wood and nails, but with patience and kindness and the firm belief that everyone deserves safety and love. As the night deepened and the stars emerged overhead, Marcus and Natalie remained on their porch, hands entwined, hearts full. They had lived through darkness and emerged into light. They had broken cycles of pain and created new patterns of love. They had raised children who were kind and strong, who understood the value of helping others, who would carry forward the lessons learned through hardship. Their story, which had begun with a woman crying in a stable and a man asking how he could help, had become a legacy. Not a legacy of wealth or fame, but something far more valuable. A legacy of love prevailing over hate, of courage defeating fear, of two people choosing each other every single day for more than 3 decades and building something beautiful from the wreckage of their separate pasts. And as they sat there on that porch, in the home they had made, surrounded by the echoes of the family they had raised, they knew without question that they had lived well. They had loved well. They had built something that would outlast them, that would ripple forward through generations, teaching by example that love and kindness were not just noble ideals, but practical tools for building a better world. The girl who had said everything hurts had healed. The man who had asked how he could help had given her the answer. Together, they had found their happy ending, and it was better than either of them had ever dared to imagine.